Welcome to this City Point podcast. We're reviewing the fourth T20 between New Zealand and Australia at the Cape Tin in Wellington. I'm joined today by Declan Hooper from Wikis and Pickets and Richard Hanson, who's in Manchester, England, and a Black Caps fan, super fan.
Absolutely also, right. Through thick and thin.
Richard, we'll start with the T20 in Wellington. Not a great day for the Black Caps, I suppose. It's another performance that you'd probably want to forget.
Yeah, it's fair to say that there was just one-way traffic this morning, or yesterday evening. But let's be honest, we just wanted to take the series to a decider, really, so we can win the series with some crowd back. But yeah, no, it was a very different to the match. 2 days before, and was it Wednesday night? I think it was, where we were, the Aussies were scoring runs for fun. It was a very different wicket. I was watching along and thinking, if it wasn't for Aaron Finch, who obviously did very well, I think the Australians would have struggled to post up, maybe post 120, 130. But then again, that probably would have been enough. The Australians bowled really well. And no New Zealand batsmen really were able to get going in any kind of note. And yeah, it was just one-way traffic and the Aussies were too good.
That final over from Kyle Jamieson, just looked at it again and I'm thinking, surely he'd bowl a different length. He bowled three in a row. Like, I know he's trying to bowl the Yorkers, but...
I know. What do they say? What do they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result, especially against a batsman like Aaron Finch. I know he's been out of form, but he's obviously coming into a bit more form now. He's had a couple of good innings out there, and he was the final over of a T20 and he opened the inning, so he was very well set. I do feel for Jamieson. He did very well in the Test series against Pakistan before Christmas, so he's had a good introduction to international cricket. But obviously, still young and he's still learning, and he'll benefit from this, I think.
Let's go back to the beginning, Declan. I was thinking, like you say, Richard, that wicket was the same one that they played on Wednesday. So obviously, it was going to be a different track. It took a lot more spin, and Ashton Agar seemed to be the one that stood out again, Declan.
Yeah, he did. It was quite hard to actually pick what a past score was on that pitch. Like I had a quick look, and I think the average winning score at the Cape Tin is 191. But it looked like no batsman was trying to could get away at all. Especially for Australia, Aaron Finch, it was probably his slow. I'd say it'd be his slowest 50 in T20 because he got there off. I think he got there 48 balls. So it was a real kind of a slog of an innings from him. And then when the Kiwis got in, you're right. It just seemed more of the same. And I think Agar, he was the pick for bowlers for me, but also I thought Adam Zampa probably had his best performance of the tour so far as well, which speaks volumes of how the pitch was turning.
Can I just interrupt this ever so slightly to just show you a comparison picture of Ashton Agar that I've found here, which our viewers might want to see. There, so it's a nice super villain situation going on. But yeah, he was great. He did very well. The ball held up in the pitch a lot. It was a lot more of a typical Kiwi slow, low wicket, which we came to know and perhaps hate in the 90s and the early noughties. What I think was interesting is that it was very hard to start on it. Aaron Finch was smart in the sense that he didn't really worry about scoring particularly quickly. He just worried about staying there. And thankfully it paid dividends for him in the end. What was the final over? 24, 28, something. I was something like that. I was expecting another broken yellow seat like Glenn Maxwell did the other night, but unfortunately we didn't get there. But yeah, the Aussies seemed to read the conditions better actually, and it's interesting because there've been a few first class matches played in Wellington in similar circumstances where the same deck is used 3 days later and significantly fewer runs are scored on it. So it's not that it shouldn't really have come as a surprise to the Kiwis that 150, 160 was probably going to be a good score.
Well, you only have to look at who did the damage for New Zealand with Mitchell Santner and Ish Sodhi. So you knew what kind of the pitch it was going to go. Maybe they needed somebody like Aaron Finch to bat right the way through, and they lost. That would have been Martin Guptill for me, or Kane Williamson, and they both got out, reasonably cheaply. I suppose Guptill was okay, but you needed somebody to hold the innings together.
They just needed to take it deep to the Australians. I think if they'd just hung around with wickets in hand in the last few overs, they could have caught up in the same way that Aaron Finch did. If Martin Guptill played an anchor role, perhaps with Kane Williamson, he's obviously fairly good at doing that. And they, wickets didn't tumble. I think we were 80 for 8 at one point. Sorry, in Australia, 8 for 80 at some point. It was obviously never gonna. We were never going to chase it from there. But if we were 2 for 80 in the same, even after maybe 13, 14 overs, could have backed ourselves to have a bit more explosive power at the end.
Talking about explosive power, I'm looking at Kyle Jamieson. God, he hits the ball. I'm just wondering why he bats so low. Is that where he always seems to bat, or is he one of those floating? He can come in when the need arises for somebody to hit it big.
I mean, it's a difficult thing because the pressure was off in the sense that we were never going to win, and he just managed to hit the ball in the middle a few times. He shows he's no mug with the bat, similar to Tim Southee in a way. Come in for a pinch hit as a sort of pinch hitter up the order occasionally, and slog it pretty far, to be fair. But he's not noted for his batting. He's certainly in the side for his bowling, despite his bowling figures. But yeah, he certainly did better with the bat, but like Joe Root's been doing in the India England Test match.
I was just looking back on the scorecard here. I think Aaron Finch got it spot on, as we were saying before. But I think the reason that he didn't need to go is actually looking at Australia's scorecard. All the other batters kind of got starts around him. Well, somewhat starts. So they all got into the teens around him. So Philippi 13, Maxwell 18, Stoinis 19. So they all kind of got going somewhat, which meant that Aaron Finch just needed to stick at the other end. And I think in the first 10 overs, he only faced something like 27 balls. He really didn't get much of the strike at all.
It was the perfect innings for him. For a man that's searching for a bit of form, he got in on a track that was difficult to get in on. And he was able to make it count. There wasn't as much pressure for him to score, very quickly from ball one, because the pitch wasn't going to allow him to do that.
How much of an effect do you think it's had? Obviously, Australia's one of the 2 games where there's been no crowds. Do you think that would have affected the Kiwis at all, or do you think it's just a circumstantial kind of thing?
It's hard to know, isn't it? Because there's not much historical precedent for it. I mean, the Kiwis haven't played in an empty stadium at home. Since nobody went to cricket back in the 90s when we weren't very good. But I mean, we're obviously going to do better with our crowds. I think New Zealand do well at home, and it definitely felt odd. Just watching it on TV, and there not being any reaction when umpires' calls, referring things upstairs, and when boundaries are being hit and wickets are being taken, it was just kind of a bit of you could hear a little bit of sort of high-fiving and things. So I think it'll probably mean that both sides will rise to the challenge. That being said, there aren't too many Aussies in New Zealand at the moment because of the quarantine that's required.
Looking at it, obviously, from the TV and that kind of thing, I think, especially the one down in Dunedin, it seemed like that really kind of almost got the Kiwis over the line in a way. It looked like a great atmosphere, and it looked like it kind of maybe gave them an extra 5-10%. Just looking at the Kiwi team, so we haven't really had too many changes throughout the 4 games. Can you envision a world where they might try and shake it up a little bit for the last game, or do you think that they try and test it?
No, I think they're probably going to go with the same 11 if everybody remains fit. I think there might have been some chopping and changing if we'd already won the series. I mean, that's obviously far from assured now, being 2-2. But when we were chatting last, and New Zealand were up 2-0 in the series, and maybe if we'd won the next one or this one now, we might have gone with someone like Finn Allen at the top of the order in the 5th ODI. But no, at this stage, I think this is clearly the best, the 11 that they consider to be the best 11, and I think we'll stick with it.
Yeah,
looking through that order though, they think Tim Seifert needs to get some runs, and Glenn Phillips really hasn't done much in this series either. So maybe the pressure's on them to get among the rounds. And I think Devon Conway sort of like did well in the first 2, and then he's gone off the ball a little bit as well. But I suppose when you get a wicket like yesterday, it was hard to, like you say, hard to get a start, and then hard to get runs quickly.
I think Tim Seifert is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he seems like the type of player that is a bit like a Glenn Maxwell type. That if it all kind of aligns and that kind of thing, he kind of can be quite devastating and destructive. But when it doesn't align, it really doesn't align. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, he's clearly learned a lot of his trade from Brendan McCullum in the same kind of wicketkeeper and destructive batsman. I mean, he's not scored a Test 100 yet, but we'll get there. But yeah, I mean, his job is to come in at the top of the order and try and cause as much damage as he can. So it either comes off or it doesn't in a T20 context, I think.
Yeah, and you must be happy now. Obviously, all the talk with Martin Guptill. Being out of form, that kind of thing. I mean, he didn't make many yesterday, but he does look a much more assured and more confident batter.
Yeah, he's had enough sleep now. His baby's few more days old. And he's been down in Wellington, and his family are up in Auckland. So he's getting a good night's kip in the hotel, and he's getting a few more runs on the field. Yeah.
Thanks for catching up again, Richard, and cheers as always, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.